Hello everyone, this is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto Uzumaki changed time and altered the fate of Kurenai Yuhi, Anko Mitarashi, and Iruka Yumino Naruto times Kurenai times Anko times Iruka, Part 3. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. Later that afternoon, the Hokage was in his office when a knock hit on his door and he said, "Come in." And the door opened and several people walked in. The third looked up and saw Shibi Aburame, Inoichi Yamanaka, Shuza Akamaiki, Shikaku Nara, Sum Inazuka, Ibiki Morino, Homura and Kaharu. He said, "Thank you all for coming on short notice. I am sure you are all wondering why I have called you all here." Kaharu said, "I am sure you have your reasons." The third nods and said, "Now what is about to be discussed in this room will be an S-rank secret. I want you all to understand if you speak of it without my permission I will have you executed immediately. Does everyone understand?" Everyone nods slowly and the third said, "Now as you all know there was an attack last night and the entire Hyuga clan was killed along with Sasuke Uchiha. Now this event has left our village in a weakened state even worse than we were back after the Kyuubi attack. Morale is at an all-time low and our defense has already been sabotaged by Orochimaru once when he entered the Forest of Death to recruit Sasuke Uchiha. Now I will tell you why I have called you here. Konoha needs something that will not only scare our enemies but also give our village a moral boost. It just happens that thanks to another incident that happened last night also we now have that." Making everyone question what he was talking about. Ibiki asked, "What are you talking about, sir? I have not heard of any other incident." The third said, "I know, in fact besides myself only 5 other people know of this. As of 8 a.m. this morning the Kyuubi no Kitsune that was sealed into Naruto Uzumaki is dead." Making everyone gasp. Inoichi said, "How, sir?" Ibiki asked, "Who did it, sir? Who killed Naruto? Let me know so that I may have some fun with them." The third chuckled and said, "Settle down everyone, Naruto is not dead. Far from it actually." Shikaku asked, "How is that possible, sir?" The third said, "I suppose I should start with telling a truth I have hidden from everyone. The truth is I know who Naruto parents were all along. Naruto real name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." Making everyone go wide-eyed as he continued, "He is the son of Minato Namikaze the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha and Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze, the Kyuubi Rasenkage of Whirlpool. Now why this is important is because the Uzumaki family has a bloodline that is carried by the females of their family." Homaru said, "But Naruto is a male." The third smiled and said, "Not when he uses his sexy no jutsu he isn't." Everyone blinked and Sum said, "What do you mean, sir?" The third said, "The sexy no jutsu that Naruto has demonstrated was an accidental jutsu that he created when attempting to do a henge. In actuality it is a shapeshift on a cellular level. It actually turns him into a woman. It turns his entire body into one. When he first created it before he figured out how to get out of it he was in it long enough to have a monthly cycle." Making everyone gasp. After everyone got over their shock the third said, "Anyways as I was saying, the Uzumaki females have a bloodline where they possess an inner personality. There are currently 2 Uzumaki in the world. One is Naruto and the other is his cousin whose identity will remain a secret. Anyways she also has this bloodline. The inner personality is not what makes this so special as all it really does is annoy the primary personality. That is not what makes it important. To actually activate the bloodline the primary personality has to do acts that disgust the inner personality until it wants to leave. When the inner personality decides to leave it dies and then the girl's body will change and get some kind of special bonus like more chakra, faster speed, more strength. Each girl is different. Now why I am explaining this to you Naruto after he heard about the death of Hinata he cried and mourned her as well as consoled another friend of Hinata in his female form because he did not want to be blamed by someone for this attack because of their own ignorance. When he did that the Kyuubi as a demon could not stand seeing him like that and must have wanted to leave Naruto to escape from being in what it considered a weak host and the bloodline killed it." Everyone digested the information and Inoichi asked, "How can we be sure that it is truly gone?" The third said, "Well besides the fact that Naruto body has changed, the seal having completely went away along with his whiskers and the fact that there is no demon chakra in him. Nothing really. Each of the people gathered thought over what they had heard and Shikaku asked, "So what exactly have you called us here for? I mean, if you are wanting to keep the fact Kyuubi is finally dead a secret, then there must be some reason." The third said, "Yes, there is. Now, because of the Kyuubi dying, Naruto body has had a major transformation. Please look into my crystal ball to see what I am referring to." As he pulled out his viewing ball. As the ball came into view, everyone gathered around and then gasped, and the third said, "As you can see, he is now the spitting image of his father along with his wings which do work. Now I have had this morning Jiraiya, Kakashi, Anko, and Kurenai all working with him, and Jiraiya, would you please give everyone your report?" The wall behind everyone shimmered and Jiraiya appeared and said, "Well, let's start off with his stats. His chakra reserves are larger than mine and the third's put together, and his chakra kantal is high chunin. His speed is low junin, physical strength is only low chunin, but his ninjutsu is where the fun begins. As the third already knows, he has known the Hiraishin for some time now, making everyone gape. He can do the Rasengan currently with the help of a Kujbunshin, but he is working on doing it without the clone's help. Before today, using only his chakra, he could make 1000 Kujbunshin at a time, but with the Kyuubi chakra after I taught him to use it, he could make 1500. Now that the Kyuubi is gone and his body has changed, he maxes out at around 1200. That does not mean that is his chakra level divided to 1200 though. It's just for some reason his body won't let him exceed a certain level, which would then put a mental strain on him. Kakashi has already taught him around 15 jutsu today that he has mastered, added to the ones Anko and myself have already taught him this month, including being able to summon Gambunta. He is basically a one-man army. Everyone were thinking of the implications of having him this strong, and Inoichi asked, "Do the wings have any other function besides flight, or do they let him fly?" Jiraiya said, "They do let him fly, and they work mostly on instinct. They block weapons, and when he uses wind jutsu, he can use them as a fan user from Suna would a fan. They also are a chakra reserve for him." The third said, "What do you mean?" Jiraiya said, "When I had him summon Gambunta earlier to make sure he still could, his wings went back into his body. Apparently half of his chakra is stored in those wings. When he uses half, they have to wait until he rests before coming back out. That is all we know for sure so far." The third said, "Very well. Now the reason I called you all here is because, as Jiraiya stated, Naruto could be a one-man army. The fact he looks like his father and knows all three of the moves that made him famous will put Iwa on edge and back away from attacking us. Since we also know that Orochimaru is planning something for the finals of the Chunin exams, it would be a good chance for the second yellow flash of Konoha to emerge to boost our own reputation, but also to make our enemies back down. What I want though is, in order for this to work, Naruto will have to represent himself as a leader that the other ninja of our village would be willing to march into battle with. This is where I want your help." Shikaku said, "You want us to train him?" The third said, "Yes, but before you decide, let me give you all a little more info to help you decide. The Naruto you all remember seeing as a child is not the real Naruto. If people would have given him a chance when he was younger, they would have discovered what I already knew and what the ones I have teaching him now have discovered. Naruto is a practical prodigy. If he reads something in a book or scroll, he only gets the basics of it, but if he hears something or actually sees it, he has a photographic memory. You all remember his pranks where he lead Chunin, Junin, and Anbu all across the village for hours. Those pranks were actually the attack patterns we used on Iwa during the last war." Kaharu asked, "What do you mean?" The third said, "When Naruto was younger, I had Naruto tested by Itachi. He took Naruto to the Anbu private training ground and ran the course one time and let Naruto watch. Naruto from that one time was able to run the entire course in less than 7 minutes, bypassing each of the traps, infiltrate the objective area, retrieve the item, and escape by designing his own strategy. I had suspected this but could not probe it until then, and from that day I would tell him stories over ramen or during our walks about different things, and I would change the names of people and places but give the exact geography of the area and the number of units and tell how they would move, attack, counterattack, and flank, withdraw and feint. I then would wait a few months and set up some kind of challenge where I offered him ramen or something he wanted, and I would have our patrols set up to run the exact patterns the ones in my stories went, and Naruto, by watching only 5 minutes, would either use the plans I gave him that we used or improve off of them. Instead of using an exploding tag or paint as he often substituted, he would instead use high pollen flowers to block the noses of the members of your clan. Soon, for the ones with Hyuga in them, he would use mirrors. Shibi asked. Mirrors, sir? The third said. Since there are no Hyugas left, I guess I can tell you. Their bloodline could not see through reflective material like mirrors. Naruto experimented and discovered this on accident. How do you think he stole all of the Hyuga underwear that one day he hung them on the front gates? He tied a mirror on his chest and back, and using his stealth skills to bypass any patrols. Anyways, what I am saying is Naruto is a lot smarter than he let people know. All the jutsu he learned from Kakashi, he had a Kujubunshin watch him do the jutsu one time slow enough for him to see the hand signs and the effect, and then he would go and work on it. In fact, a few he had also started modifying himself. If you have him read from books and scrolls, he won't get it unless he reads it multiple times, but show him things, then he will shock you by how good he is. Add in the fact he can use his Kujubunshin, and everything they learn goes back to the original. When dispelled, you have someone who has a learning curve of the Sharingan but the ability to adapt and think on his feet of a possible Sannin or Kage. Inoichi said. If what you said is true and the fact he has all those high-level jutsu, why is he going to be in the Chunin exams? Why not just advance him? The third said. 2 things. 1, there is another Jinchuriki in the exams and he is mentally unstable. Naruto is probably the only one who can fight him besides myself or Jiraiya. If we are attacked like I fear we will, then Tsunade have betrayed us because it goes against the treaty we formed to send someone like Gaara here without warning us. I believe with what I have seen and heard about him that he is the key to the enemy's plan to attack, since he can release the demon at will, allowing it to control his body. Since Orochimaru is involved, the possibility of summons is also there, so Jiraiya will have to deal with them and I will have to deal with Orochimaru and possible the Kage as well if they have betrayed us. No offense to anyone else, but Naruto is the only other person in this village who could go toe to toe with a Jinchuriki and live. If Naruto can neutralize Gaara during the actual exam, then he would be a wild card our enemies would not be expecting, and using the jutsu he knows. If he had some better strategies, a better understanding of our own units, so he can add his Kujubunshin into aid or replace any units that are injured or killed, making him not only a hero for our forces but also something for our enemies to fear. That is what I want your help in. Training him into a more effective leader. He already is a tank in battle, and with your help he could save all of our asses in a little over a week. I plan to turn him into a symbol for our village. With Orochimaru defection and Tsunade on her own self-exile, Jiraiya is the only Sannin we can count on. That is why I want your help to turn Naruto into the next Sannin. Each of the people gathered there listened to the third, and Shuza asked, Okay, I understand why you ask Ibiki, Shukaku, the elders, and Shibi here, but why me and Inoichi? The third said. I believe anything either of you might be able to teach him would be useful, because knowledge is power. Knowing your allies is just as important as knowing your enemies, and by having each of you help train Naruto, you can also decide then if I have made the right decision in wanting to turn him into a Sannin. Now who is willing to do this for the good of Konoha? One by one they thought it over and agreed, and the third said. Good, here in each of these scrolls is the Kinjutsu Kujubunshin no Jutsu in it. I want you all to take one and go and learn it today, and first thing in the morning at 7 a.m. I want you to meet at the tower in the Forest of Death and use that jutsu to help teach several things at once to different Kujubunshins. Shukaku, I would also like for you to inform your son Shikamaru also of this, including Naruto true history. I have reports from his sensei that his IQ is actually over 200. I want him to bring some shogi and go games with him and have him play them with Naruto. As you know, those games were originally designed off of battlefield tactics, so that would also help him since your son has never lost from what I have heard. Don't teach him Kujubunshin though, since he does not have the reserves for it. Shibi, I would also like your son Shino also to come and play those as well, since he is also quite brilliant at making plans from what I have heard, and anything else you feel would be important. Inform him also of the truth of Naruto also. Now remember, this an S rank secret and must not be told to anyone. I don't allow especially Danzo, because as you all know he has wanted to turn Naruto into a weapon since the day he was born, and if he heard about this he would demand it and reveal it to the entire council, and as you all know most of the council is behind him when it comes to Naruto. Thank you all for this help and hopefully everything will work out as I have planned. Each of them left and the third smiled and thought, now Naruto, it's time to show the world the real you. I hope you're ready for what I have planned. That evening after Naruto cancelled his Kajbunshians in groups of 50, Jiraiya, Anko, Kakashi, and Kurenai all gathered together around the passed out Naruto, and Jiraiya said, so you all heard now what the old man has planned for tomorrow. Each of them nodded and Kurenai went over and picked Naruto up with Anko help, and Kakashi said, why don't you guys let me take him home? He is my student for a few more days before he outranks me, and I am sure you guys could use the rest. Kurenai shot a look at Anko, who said, we would, but you don't know where the Hokage has had him moved to. Ever since the second assassination attempt on his life in the hospital after the second exam, the Hokage had him moved to a more concealed location. Kakashi asked, what second attempt? When was the first? Making all three of the other adults look at him with sweat drops. Jiraiya said, Kakashi, Orochimaru tried to assassinate him by poison right after the preliminaries. If it had not been for Anko summoning the same kind of snake and letting the medics create an anti-venom, he would have died. Then why he was in the hospital recovering from that another assassination attempt happened on him by that girl on the Sound Genin team. Hiba walked into his room in time to stop her and save his life. Anko said, after that, while I have been helping train him in the morning, I have been giving him small doses of anti-venom of every snake I can summon. We found out all his body needs is a sample of the anti-venom, and that snake can't hurt him besides the actual bite. Kakashi looked down, realizing how little he actually knew, and said, then tell me where he is now staying. Kurenai said, sorry Kakashi. He's still pissed at you right now, even though he worked with you. He needs time to get over this. You showing up and pressuring him will not help anything, and there are only around 5 people who know where Naruto is staying for his protection, so I am sorry, I won't tell you until Naruto is stable. A lot of emotional damage has been done lately, and I won't have him harmed anymore. You want to make it up for your mistakes. Don't forget you also still have another student you have ignored also. As she nods and both her and Anko shushin with the passed out Naruto away. Kakashi sighs and said, I screwed up, didn't I, Hara? As he was sent into a tree by Jiraiya fist. As he started to stand up, Jiraiya shoved him back down and summoned a toad to sit on him and said in a commanding voice, now listen here Kakashi, I did not want to do this in front of the Gaki or those women, so you will shut up and listen to me, or I will put you in the hospital for the rest of your life. I heard about what you did to the Gaki since he joined your team. I also know about other things that has happened to him. You have been a failure when it came to being a teacher to 2 of your students. Now I am going to give you a little info on your precious Uchiha that you may not know. You remember how he got that curse seal? The only reason he got it instead of being killed along with Sakura was because Naruto saved them both. Your damn favorite student was willing to give up not only the test but was willing to let his teammates die so he could escape. Sakura did not see it, but Naruto did. Sasuke, when Sakura was busy watching Naruto fight Orochimaru with everything he had, was backing away to run away. Naruto created a Kajbunshin who punched Sasuke in the stomach back to where the fighting was so he would have to help. Now that he went and did what he did, Naruto is pissed at you because he knows that had the third not told you that I was going to train him and you focus on Sasuke, that you would have had someone else train him while you personally trained Sasuke anyways. He's not stupid, that was all an act to save his life. He's also more observant than people think. Now that Sasuke dead and you're here acting like a sensei for once, he thinks you're just doing it out of guilt and pity, or that he's a replacement. He's also too prideful to actually say these things, but anyone who really knows him can read him like a book. Pity and guilt are 2 things he can't stand, so you have better start making things right with him, because if you don't, not even the Shinigami will save you from my wrath. As he left in a swirl of leaves. Once the toad went up in smoke, Kakashi slowly got up to his feet and started to move when several snakes caught him and wrapped him in a crush hold, and Anko walked out of the forest with a kunai in her hand and said, hello Kakashi. Kakashi sighed and said, what is it Anko? If you're here to tell me how much I have up as a sensei, I get it. I am the worst ever. Anko smiled evilly and said, nope, that's not why I am here. I think everyone else is doing a fine job of pointing that out. Why I am here is to tell you not to look for him when he's not training. The Gaki's finally found something in his life that he has always wanted. Love and happiness. I won't tell you who she is because he wants to protect her, but she has accepted him fully. She is the only person who his emotional mask has been completely removed by, and if you try and find him to talk to him, you will most likely discover who she is also, and if that happens, he will kill you to keep it a secret. That is if she does not do it first. You have been removed from his life by your own actions because you betrayed his trust, Kakashi, so now if you want back in it, you're going to have to earn it back, and it won't be easy. Well, that's all I wanted to tell you, but if you ever do get close to him again and hurt him like you have, I will kill you. As she had the snake squeeze him a moment and then they went up in smoke. Kakashi asked, "What do you mean I betrayed him?" Anko stopped and looked at him like he was stupid and said, "You had his trust, Kakashi, something he does not give often. He trusted you from before you were his sensei and the first day because of what you did for him when he was younger. After that day when you treated him like the villagers every day by ignoring him or cutting him down with your critical evaluation of his shortcomings without telling him how to improve. Tell me, who in this entire village could he have went to get the info on how to improve his chakra control? Who could he talk to about his speed? Who could he go to work on his taijutsu? Where could he go to get jutsu besides his Kagebunshin? The only ninja he knew for sure who could help him was the Hokage, but since he is always busy in the tower and has other things he has to do, who could he really turn to? Iruka could teach him only the leaf balancing. With his reserves, Kakashi, he could not actually learn that until he already had some form of control like tree climbing. You were his only hope at the time and you would berate him and leave him to the wolves. He was on a team but he was also alone. That is how you betrayed him, Kakashi. You ignored him. As she melted into mud. Kakashi slowly got to his feet, Aegean, looking to see if anyone else would attack him, and he sighed and thought. He had no one to go to. I thought this team was like mine. Sakura was a fangirl like Rin, but Sakura always ignored her own training to look at Sasuke. I saw Sasuke as myself, but Sasuke was not me. He only cared about power and himself, and I saw Naruto as Obito, but Obito had an entire clan to help him and friends. Naruto had neither. As he let a tear fall, he left in a swirl of leaves. When he arrived back in the village, he quickly went to the Junin lounge to get some sake to drink and sat down at a table. A few minutes later, Asuma sat down at the table and said, "So how are things with you and Naruto?" Kakashi slammed his own head into the table and said, "Does everyone know how much I up as a sensei? Does everyone take joy out of kicking me while I am down? Do you all have some kind of bet on who can kick my balls down my throat?" Suddenly Guy appeared and said, "Is that a challenge, my youthful rival? If so, I will kick your balls down your throat the most, or I will run 200 laps around the village on my thumbs, and if I can't do that I will eat 20 bowls of ramen, and if one can't do that I will ask out every person in Konoha until I get a date, and if I see a..." He fell to the ground with a smile on his face and a small blush, and Kakashi looked around the table on the floor at him, and Asuma said, "He came in to get drunk after he had to save his student Lee from being killed by Gaara earlier. Apparently Gaara want to finish what he started in the prelims." Kakashi nods and said, "I was wondering why his rants were stupider than normal. Anyways, what do you want, Asuma?" Asuma said, "I was wondering, have you noticed how close Kurenai has been toward Naruto lately?" Kakashi said, "Yeah, I noticed, but the Hokage told me it's because she is being emotional support for him with everything that has happened to him. I mean with the assassination attempts by Orochimaru and a few other things, including what happened last night." Asuma looked around and once he was sure no one else was around said, "I suppose, but the thing is, she's acting happier than she has in years if you think about it. I mean, as long as no one is talking bad about him, she is smiling and has a look of affection about her. But remember during the first part of the exams when you called him a one-trick pony, and then the way she acted in the second exam when Naruto beat one of her students. I mean, she was not just rubbing the fact Naruto beat Kiba in your face or congratulating your student. She was rubbing the fact that he was better than you claimed. Like she was proud of him." Kakashi thought it over a few moments and said, "Now that you mention it, you're right, she does seem happier lately, and she was boasting about Naruto. I also heard recently from Anko that Naruto has finally found someone who loves him and makes him happy. Also the fact that Naruto has been moved from where he lives to somewhere safe, but it does not mean that it is Naruto who has caused this. It could just be that she has been ordered to help his emotional state longer than we think. I mean, the third told me about how Naruto had his first kill and I failed in my duties to help him, so it's possible that she was the one who was assigned to help him. She could just have found someone she likes, or she could have made friends with Naruto. He does have one of those personalities that makes others happy if you get to know him. Asuma nods and said, I suppose you're right, and that does make more sense than the Ice Queen of Konoha falling for some genin, but if so, then who was his love? Kakashi snorts and said, most likely Sakura. He's been after her for years after all, and now that Sasuke's dead, she may be using Naruto as an emotional crutch. For his sake, I hope not. As he finally realized what he said. Back with Naruto and Kurenai. Kurenai had put Naruto to bed and took his cloths off except his boxers and put him to bed after treating a few wounds he still had from today, and was getting ready to take her a bath when a knock on her door drew her attention. She looked around and saw Anko had left Aegean to go stay with Iruka. That has been happening a lot lately, so she put on a bathrobe and went to the door and opened it. Sakura was standing on the other side of the door and said, Can I come in, Kurenai-sensei? Kurenai nods and steps aside, and Sakura walked in and sat down. Once Kurenai closed the door and sat down also, Sakura said, I want to talk to you about Naruto. Is he around? Kurenai said, he's passed out in the bedroom. Some things have happened to him lately and he's out with chakra exhaustion right now, so we can talk. Sakura asked, what's he like? I mean, what is he really like? Kurenai asked, what do you mean? Sakura sighed and said, I have had a lot of time to think lately and reevaluate things, and I realize I don't really know him. I mean, I was expecting him to actually kill my mother today for what she said she threatened to do to his parents, but he actually offered her a chance. Not many people would do that. Kurenai leaned back and said, he's always worried about everyone else. Even at the cost of his own happiness. When he tells people he's going to be Hokage, there are times I think he lives his life like he actually is the Hokage. Sakura sat there and thought a moment and smiled and said, I think you're right, but what if people never give him a chance to be Hokage? Kurenai smiled and said, let's just say that Naruto is now closer to being Hokage than nearly everyone in this village besides about 5 people. Sakura looked at her and said, really, why is that? Trying to find out more information on her cousin. Kurenai said, sorry, you have to wait until the Chunin exams to find out. Hokage-sama orders. That reminds me, what all did you hear of our conversation in the bathroom? As she shot a look at Sakura that said, tell me or die. Sakura gulped and said, I just heard how to activate my bloodline, that Naruto was Kushina, and that you and him are together. After that, the Hokage stopped the crystal ball. And she clamped her hand over her mouth, realizing she was not supposed to mention that. Kurenai sighed and said, damn that thing, he always uses that to check on Naruto. I swear I am going to castrate him one of these days for peeking on us. Sakura asked, how did? I mean, why are you and him together? From what I have seen, you could have nearly any guy. What made you chose to be with him? Kurenai closed her eyes and said, if I tell you this, you never tell anyone. It's something I don't like to talk about and it's very personal. If you tell this to anyone, you will not only be betraying my trust but Naruto's. Do you understand? Sakura nods and Kurenai said, well, and over the next 2 hours she told Sakura about how Naruto first saved her and then she later learned it was him, saved him, then a few random times of things she thought were special, and then the day she found him on the Hokage monument after the wave mission, and then how their relationship went from there, leaving out the recent events with Kyuubi dying and him having wings. Sakura for her part was amazed at the end of the story and said, that is so romantic. I never knew he was such a sweet guy. You got lucky, and I think he did also getting you. I hope you both have a happy life as husband and wife someday. Kurenai blushed and said, maybe someday, but we still are working on our feelings and other things. It's going to take time for both of us. Sakura said, perhaps, perhaps not. You know, the life of a ninja is dangerous and you may have to move your plans forward faster. Anyways, I want to tell you thanks for talking to me, and I need to go. I don't want to leave Tenten alone too much right now. She's really depressed over the loss of Neji. As she got up and left. Kurenai sighed and went to check on Naruto and saw him whimpering like he was having a bad dream, and she sighed and crawled into bed beside him to hold him, and he wrapped his wings protectively around her, still asleep. The next day when the Hokage arrived with Ibiki, Shino, Shibi, Shuza, Inoichi, Sum, Shikaku, Sum, Homura and Kaharu arrived along with Iruka. They heard an explosion and all look and saw Naruto flying around 15 feet off the ground extremely fast as 4 huge snakes chased after him with earth spikes shooting out of the area. Traps going off with weapons flying at him along with explosive notes going off, toads shooting oil at him, and Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Anko all stood on a hill with Kurenai tied to a cross behind them as they were shooting off fire, earth, lightning, wind and water jutsu at him extremely fast. Naruto dodged a spike quickly throwing a kunia to the right as a fire jutsu came at him using Hiraishin. He disappeared and reappeared 30 yards away as he flew high dodging the snake that burst out of the ground. He then clipped his wings behind him backflipping in air to dodge a water dragon. He then used the speed he built up from flying toward the ground to barrel roll to the left to dodge another earth spike as boulders began flying at him. He quickly flashed through hand seals and without calling a jutsu he pulled back in flight to a complete stop, flapped his wings forward sending the water and fire jutsu that were coming at him back toward Jiraiya and Anko. He then quickly replaced himself with a log as a snake bit down where he had been a moment earlier. Naruto then flew high into the air above the treetops and then cupped his wings behind him Aegean and fell toward the earth quickly gaining more speed as he neared the ground. He pulled up at the last second running 3 feet off the ground. Kakashi saw this and had his dogs burst from the ground trying to bite him and Naruto grabbed one and threw it at the snakes who were coming behind him forcing Kakashi to release the summons or have his favorite dog ate. Naruto was still flying at Junin level speed as he approached the hill. He quickly created a Kujubunshin who hanged into Kurenai and he caught it as he flew a little higher off the ground. The Kujubunshin started to do hand signs and as Naruto crested the hill the bunshin was covered in smoke as Naruto flew higher into the air and then he said, boom. And Kurenai who was tied behind Jiraiya, Kakashi, and Anko exploded blowing all 3 off the hill. Naruto slowed his speed down and shifted Kurenai who he was holding into a bridle carry and he lightly landed on the ground. The moment he did Jiraiya began clapping and said, well done Gaki. You just passed the mission. Tsunade, Orochimaru and myself all failed over 25 years ago. The mission was the one where we were named the Sannin by Hanzo. An important person had been captured by Iwa and was being held in Rain at the time by 1,000 Iwa nins. The person who was being held had information on the defense of each of the hidden village including patrol patterns as well as medical records on all Chunin and Junin. Kumo had sent close to 400 ninja to capture this person, Wind had sent 300 and Konoha had sent 700 ninja all trying to get this person and either to eliminate him or bring him to Thier village so the information he had could be used to beat the other villages. In the end of the battle there were only 5 of us left alive. Myself, Tsunade, Orochimaru, Hanzo, and the informant himself. Last night I had Kakashi and Anko come and help recreate the battle as best as it could and where at the end of the battle Hanzo took the man to his village and forced us to leave his country or give it to our enemies after he named us the Sannins. You yourself not only extracted the target but also nearly eliminated us as well. Good job. Naruto blushed as Kurenai who was now on her feet standing beside him put her hands together over her heart and in a sickening sweet voice said, "My hero," as she kissed him on the cheek making him blush and everyone else giggle. The third clapped and said, "Well done Naruto. Now it's time I talk to you, Shino, and Shikamaru," making all 3 look at him and walk in front of the Hokage. The third said, "Now as you both now know Naruto had the Kyuubi in him until recently and I assume that you're both okay with that." Shino said, "I already knew about the Kyuubi. My clan hive informed me as a child. I find it illogical for anyone to think he and that creature are one in the same." Shikamaru sighed and said, "It's too troublesome to think of how many idiots there are in Konoha. I had suspected for a while now but after getting it confirmed I still don't think bad of you Naruto." Naruto smiled and before he said anything the third said, "Good, now the reason you both are here as you have been informed is to help train Naruto along with the others I have brought here. Now you may think this is stupid since your opponents in the exams but the truth is I am expecting war to break out that day. No matter what happens in the exam I have already decided to give both Shino and Shikamaru a field status of acting Chunin. You Shino will be facing Konkuro, the puppet master, and you Shikamaru will be facing Tamari, the wind user, while Naruto will be facing Gaara in the first match. If Naruto is not able to stop Gaara as I plan, then you are both to have your matches and get to a point in the matches where you are the sure winner and forfeit. That way you won't face Gaara. If Naruto can't stop him, he will weaken him enough where a Junin I have in mind can finish the job. Do you both understand? Both boys nod and Naruto said, what about me? The third said, remember how I asked you if you would be willing to help me with a problem? What I want for you to do is to become the third Sannin. With Orochimaru betrayal and the fact you have faced off against him already and lived means you should be able to again. Anyways, you will become the Tenshi Sannin. The Angel Sannin. The fact you look so much like your father and know several A and S rank jutsu will make many fear you. Now we have wasted enough time and I can explain more later. Please make as many Kajbunshians as you can so we may begin. Naruto nods and creates 1200 again and the third said, alright, I want 100 with me. Kakashi, Jiraiya, Anko, as you all told me last night, Naruto has a high wind affinity but can use earth and water jutsu as well. I want you to take 5 clones per jutsu and cram as many as possible into today's training. Use Kajbunshin to make yourself more available to them. Everyone who can use Kajbunshin, please make them, and each person or Kajbunshin grab 5 clones also and start teaching him what you feel he needs. Shino, Shikamaru, you're both to teach him strategy using Shoji and Go. You're also to grab 5 also each and work with them. Homura and Kaharu, I wish for you both to begin drilling every aspect of the politics of the village as you can, including the way the council works, who on the council are followers and who are leaders, how the council, the elders, and myself deals with diplomats and VIPs. You remember all those things the Shadaim and Nadaim crammed into our heads when we were younger. Everyone get started. I want 200 Kajbunshians to come with me. Any Kajbunshians that are not being used are to work on chakra control. I want the real Naruto to begin running to the walls of the forest and back again until I tell you to spar with someone. As they all separated, the third pulled the 200 he requested into the tower itself and closed the doors, locking everyone else outside. He then walked to the main battle area where the real him was and his clone melted, and he said, alright Naruto, Iruka here is going to watch you and help you with this part of your training. I want each of you to grab a book or scroll and begin reading. If you have any question, please ask because this is very important. Every time you finish a book or scroll, I want you to grab another and another. Even if it is one that has been read before by another clone, read it still, since you have harder time remembering read documents. Now begin. I have work at the tower to do, so I will be back later. As he left in a swirl of leaves. Around noon the third Hokage arrived back at the tower and said, so Iruka, how are they doing? Iruka said, they have all read every document here at least 3 times, sir. I believe they should remember it. The third nods and said, alright, one at a time. I want you to each dispel until you're all gone and tell Naruto to return to the tower outside and rest. I will join him shortly. Iruka, I have lunch for everyone waiting at my office. Please go and bring it back here so they can eat. As the clones began to dispel, Iruka left. Around 20 minutes later, the third walked out and had Iruka following behind him with a few clones of Naruto and set the food for everyone to eat before they dispelled themselves. Naruto was sitting on the ground holding his head and he said, alright Naruto, dispel them all and everyone come eat. Naruto nods and then groups of 100 dispelled together. In about 15 minutes he had them all dispelled and everyone else was already eating, and the third asked, any observation anyone would like to state? Ibiki asked, does this kid know how to be scared? I have used nearly every mental torture on him I can think of and his clones actually mocked me. No wonder he passed the first test with a blank page. The third chuckled and Sum asked, I notice that he has increased senses. Is there a chance that the changes to his body might become a new bloodline? The third said, I honestly don't know. We would have to wait until he had a child to find out. Of course we could ask someone to volunteer to help us find out. How about it? Any of you ladies interested? Earning a glare from Kurenai and Naruto. Anko chuckled and said, sorry, I am taken. However, Kurenai is able and available. She could test him right now if you would like, sir. Kurenai turned beet red, and before she had a chance to say or think anything, Kakashi said, think about it, Kurenai, all that stamina he has. Glad to finally get a chance to embarrass her for all the times she threatened his book. Jiraiya, seeing a chance for some payback, said, well, what of it, kid? think you got the balls to handle a woman like her? I bet she's a screamer and real wild animal in bed. Just then Naruto burst from the ground at both Kakashi and Jiraiya feet with a haymaker that both hit men in the nuts and lifted them off the ground as the clones grabbed the men's feet and began swinging them around several times, making them dizzy, and released them flying toward each other, where they hit each other and fell to the ground passed out. The clones then walked over and performed a few hand seals and touched both men, who were instantly covered in smoke, and when the smoke was revealed everyone burst out laughing. Jiraiya was now a 60-year-old woman with deflated and weighed around 600 pounds, and Kakashi was a 90-year-old woman with gray hair and DD size that were saging all the way down her belly, and she also weighed about 400 pounds. The clones pulled out a water balloon and held it above both men before forming a Rasengan and bursting the balloon and letting it fall on the woman. As both men woke up and looked around, Naruto clones went up in smoke, and when they went to check themselves to see how bad their nuts had been damaged, they immediately passed out, Aegean finding them gone. At this everyone burst out laughing. Aegean the third looked at Naruto, who was smirking, and said, "Was that really necessary?" Naruto said, "I hate perverts and I don't like seeing men pick on women. I don't care what people say about me, but try and hurt someone like Kurenai and you will deal with me." Making Sume smile at him and thought, "Protective and loyal toward your mate, huh? I understand now why Hana, Kiba and myself have all been smelling your scent on her and hers on you here lately. I guess you're trying to keep it a secret or something. Something's going on with you both, because Kurenai would never kiss anyone, even jokingly like she did earlier to a man, and Anko keeps giving Kurenai and you looks like she's waiting for something. I wish you luck, kid, and Kurenai. You have my clan's protection as an honorary member, kid, for showing the belief that my clan follows. Protecting your pack." Sume then cleared her throat and said, "I believe they have had enough punishment for now, Naruto. Also, I would like to say this now. I believe that you have shown everyone the truth about you, and as such I would like to make you an honorary member of my clan, meaning if you or your family ever need help, we would be honored to help you as we would one of our own. Do you accept?" Naruto looked at her and bowed and said, "I am honored by this, Inazaku-sama, but I do not wish to have your clan or anyone else's punished by the ones who can't see the truth. That's why I have." He was cut off Sume dog, who jumped up and bit Naruto hand, making it bleed, and Sume also cut her hand and walked over and had her companion release his hand, and she grabbed it and said, "Your choice has been made already for you, so you can't take it back. You now have the blood of an Inazaku in you, so you have no choice but to accept us as an honorary clan to you. Your family is now our family, and if you or they are ever in danger, we will aid you." Naruto bowed his head and said, "And if yours is ever in need also, I will do all I can to aid you, as will my family." "Thank you." Sume let go of his hand and she looked and said, "Interesting, my wound has healed with only a mild scar. So has yours. Now let's eat." As she walked over to the table Iruka had set up, the third walked over and said, "You don't know how much of an honor you have just been given, Naruto. The fact her companion is the alpha male also helped means that all of the companions of their clan notice you as one of tier. That is a rare honor that has only been done a total of 3 times in all my years." Naruto nods and walked over, releasing the jutsu on both still passed out men as Kurenai walked over and said, "I think she knows." Naruto said, "Possible. I mean, yours and my scent has probably been on each other for a while now, since we spend so much time together. Kiba might have noticed but chose not to say anything, and she has probably also noticed today." Kurenai nods and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You didn't have to do that for me. I could have gotten them myself." Naruto said, "What's stopping you now? I mean, I could have let you have first crack, but I figured with as many times as the perverts been peeking at the hot springs and Kakashi reading his books, you would have had trouble stopping them long enough to get revenge, so I slowed them down for you." Kurenai stopped in her tracks and said, "You know, I never thought of that," as she turned around and marched back over to where the 2 men were finally coming around and said, "Now it's time to actually lose those," as she pulled out a kunai and both men paled before running away. Sume burst out laughing and said, "My, it seems your trickster side has infected Kurenai, Naruto. I sure hope nothing else infects her, or we may have a whole litter of little blonde hair, red-eyed, winged tricksters running around Konoha." As she shot a look at both Naruto and Kurenai, making them realize she really did know. Naruto said, "Well, I am sure they would be little angels. After all, men all the time say Kurenai beauty is from heaven, so Everyone laughed as Kurenai blushed before she planted her fist into the top of Naruto's head, making him hit the ground. She then said, "You know, you still have a lot to learn about woman Naruto." Naruto asked, "So are you willing to teach me?" As he got up. Kurenai blushed as everyone looked at her and she said, "What's in it for me?" Naruto frowned for a moment and then smirked as an idea formed and walked over to her and whispered in her ear so no one else could hear, "Well, how about you let me treat you like a goddess for an entire day, feeding you all of your favorites while I have my Kujubunshians massage your feet, air cool you with my wings, and pamper your every need, all dressed in nothing but a toga, and then fly you up into the air and held you as we watched the sunset on a cloud, and then you can have me do anything and everything you have ever desired." Kurenai suddenly was blown back with a nosebleed, passing out as the thought of what she could have him do hit. To say everyone was stunned would have been an understatement. Naruto had just made the most powerful pervert basher in the entire village. Kakashi, who walked out of the woods seeing it was safe, asked, "What did you say to her, Naruto?" Naruto said, "Out of respect for her I refuse to say. It mostly just involved certain punishments on several men who have been perverted toward her in the past, including you and Ero Sanin, and then forcing you to serve as her personal slave, all wearing a dress as all the women who feel as she does all line up and use the 1,000 years of death on you, using anything they want." Kakashi paled and backed away as everyone laughed at his misfortune. The third said, "No, really, what did you tell her though? To get that reaction out of her is unbelievable." Naruto looked at the Sandame and said, "Oh, just." Kurenai at that moment began to stir and she wiped the blood from her nose as she stood up glaring at Naruto and said, "You are so dead. You think that night in the bath Togoth," as she caught herself making everyone wide-eyed as she realized she was not alone with Naruto and that she had just said something she could not deny. Naruto slapped his head and said, "Smooth Tenchi." Kurenai sighed and the third said, "Well, I must admit, you both hid it longer than I thought you would be able to. I mean, nearly 6 weeks is pretty good in this village to have a secret." Kakashi said, "6 weeks?" as he looked at Kurenai and Naruto. Jiraiya said, "Really, you have been hiding details from me, boy. What's she like?" He was immediately sent flying, this time by a Kujubunshin from behind who kicked him. Shikamaru raised an eyebrow and said, "That's twice now you created those without making hand seals." "How?" Naruto looked confused a moment and said, "I've used it so much I can make smaller numbers of them without hand seals. I guess I never really thought about it." "Why?" Anko said, "Making most jutsu sealess means you have completely mastered the jutsu. It's just rare for someone your age to do so is all." Naruto nods and then saw everyone looking at him and Kurenai and he sighed and said, "Please everyone, don't tell about me and Kurenai. We really don't know what it is we feel for each other yet, and we are taking it slow and have only really just talked and had ate dinner together. The tub deal she was talking about was me in a pair of shorts and her a bikini, and she gave me a back rub when I overdid it with training. Nothing happened besides her finding a few quirks to use against me for her own fun. I don't want people to start treating her bad because of me. I know that most of you have either liked me before or were at least neutral toward me by the fact you never openly showed me any hate or had your kids act against me. I also know the fact Kyuubi's dead now will help some others changes also, but it will take time to change people's opinions, and between now and then they might harm her to harm me. Please, I beg you." As he got down on his knees, shocking everyone because he never would lower himself to anyone. Shibi was the first who spoke and said, "We understand, Naruto and my son, and I shall remain silent on it. We respected you as you were similar to our clan." Sum said, "You already got my silent and protection. Anyone goes to harm you or those in your pack, they have us to deal with," as she pat the head of her companion. Shikaku said, "It would be way too troublesome to even think about telling." Shuza said, "Let me know when the wedding is, I will bring the food," making both Naruto and Kurenai blush and everyone else laugh. Kakashi said, "Damn it, Asuma going to rag my when he finds out he was right. He told me he thought you two were getting close, but I told him it was probably just orders." Anko looked at him and asked, "How the have you lived so long?" Naruto nods as everyone else slowly agrees with him, thanking them. After that they began to eat. After everyone was done eating, the third said, "All right, Naruto, make the Kujubunshians again. I want everyone to do as they did earlier except the real Naruto. I want you to spar while being asked questions you will have to answer while you fight. That way we can all judge your mental ability to think wisely under pressure. Naruto nods and created the Kujbunshians and asked, "Who will I be sparring with?" The third quickly created a mud clone and reached for his robes and threw them, revealing himself in his battle garments, and he said, "Me." Making everyone wide-eyed. He then said, "I don't want you to hold back. I also need to dust off some of my rust from sitting behind the desks along for the fights I am expecting. You won't be able to hurt me. My mud clone will be asking you questions as we fight. Begin when ready." Naruto nods and he jumped backwards, putting space between them as he began hand seals covering the air in mist, raising a few eyebrows as many thought. He did it without calling the name. Interesting. The third began his own hand seals as he blew the mist away and then sent shurikens at the tree where Naruto was, only for him to dissolve in water. The real Naruto jumped from behind the third and prepared for to really fight. The mud clone began to speak as Naruto and the third charged into a Tiahutsu match. If a high-ranking ninja from a foreign village comes to sign a peace treaty with our village, and after signing the treaty that night he conceals himself in a mask and goes and attempts to kidnap an heir to one of the clans of Konoha and was killed by the clan head of that family before he could escape, what would you do as the highest-ranking person there at the time? Naruto said as he dodged a leg sweep and sent a kick at the Sandame's head. Well, I assume you're referring to the Hyuga cloud incident that I read about earlier in the tower. I would first make sure the Hyugas had not sent someone to confront the other members of his party. The mud clone said. No, they hadn't. Why? Naruto sent an uppercut at the Sandame as he dodged the swipe from Emma's staff form and said, well, in that case I would have searched the nin's body and found a cloud exploding tag and a kunai from cloud. Surely if it was a kidnapping attempt, then he would want to be prepared for a quick escape and confrontation. I would then jump over the wall of the clan compound and throw the kunai with the exploding tag at the wall, blowing it from the outside in. I would then put a scratch in his hiate, marking him as a missing nin. At this point everyone was looking at him in confusion, and the Sandame did a mule kick to Naruto, making him go up in smoke as another Naruto burst from the ground, grabbing his extended leg and throwing him. The mud clone asked, why would you do that, Naruto? Naruto said, the answer is simple. It was chess. The kidnapping was a fake. If it would have been a simple kidnapping, they would have sent a pawn or lower ranking ninja to do the actual mission instead of a knight like the cloud did. By using the knight, or in this case the very same ninja who signed the contract, making him a very important piece, they knew the odds were he would be killed. By making it look like he attacked the compound, and then marking him as a missing nin, you can take the evidence at the scene then to the Fire Lord and the Lightning Lord, showing the remains of the kunai were from metals can be traced back in Cloud Country, and the exploding tag would have been consistent with Tier also, and you would say that the man must have became a missing nin because of his fear of peacemaking, the idea we oppose peace void, and that Cloud was the real threat of going to war if Tier high-ranking ninja would be willing to break the new peace treaty the same day. If Cloud said he was not a missing nin and that we faked the evidence, then you could simply ask, then why was he attacking the Hyuga compound in the first place? With all the evidence supporting our claim, then they could not admit they actually backed the kidnapping or look bad to other countries and Thier Lightning Lord, which they wouldn't, because then they would have had to pay us back for the lie with something like Thier Forbidden Scroll or one of Thier clans or bloodlines as payment. That's my opinion though. As he was sent flying backwards into a tree by Emma, who changed from a staff to an ape. The third paused and said, I see you came to a better conclusion than I did back then, Naruto. I guess I got too wrapped up in the Hyuga demand for retribution to think of that. Naruto said as he stood up. That's the problem with a lot of people. They think more about their own ambition and forget we are all part of a larger picture. The village comes first and then the people. That's the lesson I learned from my father. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. However, there are times when that is wrong, when the need to do what is right, and just then when you personally go against it. As he charged the third, only for the third to go up in a puff of smoke. Naruto jumped back, forming hand seals, and then a water dragon hit an earth dragon, collided, turning into mud, and then a mud dragon formed and blades of wind collided with the mud dragon, destroying it. Everyone was watching, and Shikakamaru got up and pulled his dad, who had taken his shirt off while his clones hadn't, said, how is it Naruto has advanced so fast? Shukaku walked over with Shikamaru, leaving the Kujbunshin looking at the board for Shoji, and said, Kujbunshians. When they are dispelled, everything they learn go back to the original. So with his large chakra reserves and ability to make so many, his training goes faster than everyone. But an Uchiha except Naruto is better because he is actually getting experience using them, where an Uchiha just copies it and does not actually learn to use the jutsu or what makes it tick. Shikamaru nods as he thinks of the possibilities of this and go wide-eyed and said, "Dad, exactly how long are we planning to help him train?" Shukaku said, "Until the exams." "Why?" Shikamaru thought. "Around 100 jutsu a day plus everything else he is learning, times a week. Naruto is definitely not someone to have against you or mess with." And said, "It might be wise if our clan were to get on Naruto's good side like the Inazaku did earlier. I mean, with what I have seen already of Naruto progress and improvements as well as his learning curve. Don't think just jutsu, think of everything else he is learning." By Naruto's own words, the Hokage must have had him reading some important documents to know about the kidnapping of Hinata, since only the other clans of Konoha knew the exact details besides the Hokage. For Naruto to have that kind of information means Naruto must be reading Anbu reports or the Hokage personal files. I don't believe it would be the Anbu reports though, so if he's reading the Hokage's personal files, so. Shukaku went wide-eyed as he understood where his son was coming from and said, "I see. I do believe you are right. It seems the Sandaime has things planned out for every possible equation." As he walked over to the Kajbunshin thinking everything over. Unknown to either Nara, a pair of bugs flew away to another area not too far away and landed on the fingers of a father and son a few moments as they then nod and returned to the documents they had brought along with the strategy books and games they had. Inoichi, hearing the idea of Naruto on the Hyuga conflict, asked, "Hokage-sama, I got one for him. What exactly would you do with the current situation of the Uchiha death and the fallout from it?" Naruto, who was fighting, narrowed his eyes controlling his anger and said in a neutral tone, "Well, truth is there are several things I find wrong with the current condition of the Uchiha. First is I believe that Konoha is breaking its own laws regarding the only remaining Uchiha, and I also believe that Sasuke should be given a traitor's funeral. He attempted to rape a fellow Konoha shinobi before going to an enemy ninja. I have heard people claiming he should be put on the memorial stone, and to do so would be a disgrace to not only the dead but every other ninja in Konoha forces." Inoichi asked, "What do you mean Konoha is breaking its own law regarding Itachi?" Naruto said, "By order of the Shadaime Hokage of Konoha, the council and the Hokage are not allowed to mess with clan politics. The Uchiha massacre was an internal political situation. When he was charged with their deaths, Konoha was breaking its own laws, or at least partially. Itachi lost the rights of the Uchiha clan privilege the moment he left the village to become a missing nin. Before that we could not actually charge him, but when he did leave, Sasuke had the right to blame him with his clan's death and charge him, but now that Sasuke is dead, Konoha should reverse its stance on the Uchiha massacre. He's still guilty of all the other crimes he's committed since then, but as far as the massacre goes, Itachi is now legally being wrongly accused. I know some of you are having trouble understanding what I mean, so I will change the situation a little. Say Neji killed the entire Hyuga clan because of his father's death and that seal I read about. If he had remained in Konoha afterwards and there were no higher ranking Hyuga than him, Konoha technically could not charge him with the death of his clan. We could charge him with the death of any Konoha ninja who were on duty at the time, but everyone else would be a legal kill, at least in the eyes of the laws of Konoha. It's one of the laws I think was not thought out far enough. If Neji claimed clan politics as his motive, nobody could do jack shit about it. Am I correct, old man?" Everyone was stunned, and the third Hokage sighed and stopped the match and said, "Unfortunately, you are correct. Because of that particular law, if any member of any clan killed the rest of their clan, Konoha has no actual legal law to charge them with, and if their clan had no active ninja, then they could walk the streets free as a bird like nothing happened." Soong whistled and said, "I would never have thought of it like that. I always thought that law was a good thing, but with that view it is a double-edged sword." Everyone was stunned. The third said, "Anyways, let's continue, shall we?" As he decked Naruto, but Naruto burst into water. The third said, "Damn, this is tough. What's the count, Kakashi?" Kakashi said, 210 for you, sir. 174, correction 171 for Naruto. Naruto said, "Damn, this is harder than I thought, old man." As his wings faded from his back as he fell to the ground, as the Kunai Bunshin no jutsu he used was blocked by a mudwall. The third smirked and said, well, that's official Naruto. You just reached about 1/2 of your total chakra reserves used, making Shino and Shikamaru go wide-eyed along with Iruka. As the rest of the day went on, Naruto learned a lot of things from the clan heads and also earned a lot of respect from them. Even to the point where he passed out and all his Kajbunshin went up in smoke. The Sandaime was on his knees panting and said, I can't believe he was able to keep up with me for that long. What was the total, Kakashi? Kakashi said, 610 for you and 490 for him, sir. He learned several from you during combat and turned them back on you. I must say his ability to learn jutsu is nearly as good as a Sharingan, with it being better. Shikamaru and his father shared a knowing smirk, as did Shino and his father. The third said, I see. I think you really have not understood Naruto enough yet, Kakashi. The fact he is not coping these just you but actually learning them means Naruto is better. Getting several nods, Kakashi rubbed the back of his head, embraced, and the third sighed and said, okay everyone, thank you all for your help today, we got a lot accomplished. Tomorrow is the city-wide funeral service for the Hyuga clan. There will be no training tomorrow, but do not come to the funeral unequipped. We can't afford to be caught off guard with the threat of war hanging over our heads. Everyone is dismissed. As he shushan away, Kurenai and Anko picked up Naruto and shushan away and put him in bed, and Kurenai kissed him on the lips lightly and whispered, I am proud of you, my hero. The next day was a sad one for Konoha. Today was the day of the funeral for the Hyugas. Naruto decided to forget the henge for him to hide on today and instead pulled out a cloak Anko had gotten for him as a present for learning the Doden Jutsu she wanted him to learn. This one was solid black with a hood that covered his head completely, where you could only see his face from the front. It was much like Anbu wore, which may not be too far-fetched considering Anko is the second highest Anbu currently in Konoha, directly under Ibiki. Underneath it he had his vest with all his scrolls and his weapon pouches on both legs. During the training yesterday, Jiraiya had given him a book on seals his father wrote, and Naruto found one that he could really use, so he quickly made it on each of his kunai pouches and one of each hand. It was a quick summon seal where all he had to do was send a little chakra burst and bam, kunai in hand. He went to Kurenai's room and knocked. She had laid beside him again last night and he liked waking up with her beside him, but she quickly went to start getting ready. Kurenai said in a sad voice, come in. And Naruto opened the door and saw her dress sitting on the bed. He walked over to her and sat down on his knees with his hood pulled back and pulled her into a hug and said in a soft voice, I know, I miss her also. As Kurenai was crying. After several minutes she asked, why did this have to happen? Naruto closed his eyes and said, I don't know Tenchi, but I do know one thing. She's watching over us both now, making sure we will be alright. Kurenai pulled away and looked into his eyes and asked, how do you know that? Naruto said, because it was her gift to me that killed the Kyuubi. I know the old man said it was my bloodline, but I think it was her who gave me a new chance at life. I think Hinata was the one who really killed it so we could be together. She is also watching out for you because you were the closest thing she had to a mother in a long time. She's giving you a chance for happiness with me because she cared for us both. Why else would so many people readily accept our relationship when they found out? I mean, you're the most beautiful woman in this village, with nearly every male in the village wanting to be with you, but you never found one that would make you feel the way you do with me now. Until recently I was the village demon. For us to have what we have now, it must be because we have someone looking out for us, and I think it's Hinata. Kurenai smiled at this and said, you're right, I think so also. It would be like her. Naruto nods and said, that's why today, when I go to the funeral, I am going to smile when I say goodbye to her. A smile and a thank you for what she has done. I won't let her memory be a sad one. Kurenai nods and said, you're right, I won't cry either unless it's tears of joy. Naruto pulled her into a hug Aegean and held her close, and after several moments he let go and looked into her eyes. She looked into his and they slowly leaned forward and closed their eyes, sharing a true kiss. No secrets, no regrets, no hiding. As they broke apart they looked into the other's eyes and saw nothing but love. Naruto said, promise me something. Kurenai looked confused and Naruto said, promise me that if something happens today you will live and go on. Kurenai went wide-eyed a moment and said, nothing's going to happen. Naruto said, I know, you're right, Nothing's going to happen, but if it does, promise me you will protect yourself. I know you strong enough to do it, but I will feel better if you promise me that you will protect yourself, and if something happened to me you will go on and live your life as happily as you can with no regrets. Please. I just got a bad feeling and I won't be able to save everyone if I have to worry about you. Kurenai stood up and walked over to her dresser, grabbing a hairbrush, and had her back to him and said, "Only if you promise me you will come back to me. You never go back on your word, so promise me if something does happen you will come back to me alive." Naruto closes his eyes and said, "All right, I promise." Kurenai nods and she drops the hairbrush in her hand, and before Naruto knew it he had been pushed on top of the bed with Kurenai on top of him, holding him tightly with her head in the crook of his neck. She was crying and said, "Please don't leave me. I love you. I know I do. Every time we're apart I feel pain. I feel you when you're sad, when you're hurting, when you're angry. I feel your pain and you feel mine. You are my everything. Please don't leave me for anything. I can't live without you. Please come back to me." Naruto was shocked. Kurenai has always held her emotions to everyone. Sure, he could feel hers for some reason, but never like this. It was like a dam broke and it was flooding him. He slowly put his arm around her and said in a soft voice, "I love you also. I never knew love until you came into my life. I would die without you and I won't die without you in my arms." Kurenai never knew she would be so happy hearing those 3 words, but she said, "So there's no going back now, we finally know what we feel, huh?" Naruto said, "I knew all along what it was, I just never knew the name of it." Kurenai chuckled and then a flash of light illuminated the entire room and both sighed and said, "Anko, you're dead." A chuckle was heard that was definitely not Anko, and both looked up and saw Sakura there, and Naruto went wide-eyed and she said, "You both make a cute couple, cousin, but I must know, what the hell happened to you? Why do you look so different?" Naruto slipped his head back onto a pillow before bursting out laughing and said, "I guess I should say I am sorry for lying to you all these years." Sakura waved her hand and said, "Don't worry about it. I understand completely. Kurenai and I had a little talk the other day and she told me about how you both got together. I also understand why we never had a chance as children, but there's no way in hell you're getting away with not helping me get rid of this damn woman in my head." Naruto chuckled and Kurenai said, "So how did you get in?" Sakura said, "Your other roommate let me in when her and Iruka left. They said you both were still here after I told them I knew about you both and that you're my cousin. They told me to prepare for a shock, but you look like your father now. What happened to your whiskers?" Naruto got up after Kurenai did and he cracked the bones in his back before he took his cloak off and his wings flew out, making Sakura go wide-eyed and gape and said, "The fox is dead. Somehow when I was in my sexy no jutsu activated the Uzumaki bloodline, and since the fox was my inner self." Sakura nods and said, "It died and your body made you an angel. Kakashi-sensei is right. You really are the most surprising ninja ever. I wonder what he will do when he sees you. I mean, he was your father's student." Naruto said. "He nearly fainted." Sakura went wide-eyed again and said, "He already know." Naruto nods and said, "Yeah, some stuff has happened lately that I am involved in. You're currently not allowed to know, and if you were not family you would not know about this yet either. The Sandame plans to tell the entire village later." Sakura, "Do you have your ninja equipment with you?" Sakura said, "No, why? It's just a funeral." Kurenai said, "Sakura, come over here to my dresser and stock up on weapons. I am going to use my rank to allow you to know that Konoha may be attacked at any time now. All Anbu and Junin have been told to prepare for an attack in case we are attacked." Sakura was shocked and asked, "Who's going to attack us?" Kurenai looked at Naruto and he said, "Remember the snake bastard we met in the Forest of Death, Orochimaru? Him and the Sound may attack, and we may also be attacked by Suna as well, so watch out for them for now. Don't attack them unless they attack first, but keep that in mind in case of a double cross. We believe it's going to happen during the Chunin exams, but because of what has happened it may be any time now. That's all I can tell you." Sakura narrowed her eyes and said, "Sound. The village Sasuke was going to go to." Naruto nods, hearing the venom in her voice when she said Sasuke name, and Sakura quickly started to arm. Kurenai said, "Naruto, can you give us a minute alone? I need to help Sakura get some stuff." Naruto nods and walks out of the room. A few minutes later they both walk out of the room and Naruto noticed she had changed her cloths a little and had a few noticeable accessories under her cloths. He nods and pulls his hood up hiding himself and he walked over and took Kurenai's arm and linked his into hers and led her out the door. Sakura came up beside them and walked together and Naruto said, "Remember Sakura, don't tell anyone what you have heard and if you need me call me today, call me Maelstrom." Both women looked at him and Sakura said, "Why not Tenchi? It suits your new look." Naruto said, "True, but my name also means Maelstrom besides fishcakes and if you saw how I fight now you would believe it suits me perfect." Sakura snorts and said, "Whatever Maelstrom. I know you're only changing your name so you could be seen together with your Tenchi. Anyways, I will play along, but I think you should be Tenchi." Naruto nods and together they walk the rest of the way to the funeral. Naruto stood by Kurenai who stood next to Kiba and Shino who quirked an eyebrow, but that was all, and Sakura walked over to Tenten and Ino and sat with them. The Sandaime looked at Naruto for a moment as he walked in front of the crowd and nodded slowly and said, "It is a sad day in the history of the village. Several days ago this village had a terrible incident where enemy ninjas snuck into the village and set traps to destroy the Hyuga clan. It has been determined that they were aided by a fellow Konoha citizen, making several people murmur having not heard about this. The Hokage said, this person not only is believed to be responsible with aiding the enemy into entering Konoha but planned to defect from the village but not before he attempted to rape the heiress of the Hyuga clan, shocking many of the citizens even more. The third said, this person while attempting to carry out this act killed her but not before she killed him also in self-defense. The person was none other than our own Sasuke Uchiha, making everyone who had not known gasp. Several council members fell in their chairs at this. The Hokage said, it is for this reason that I have decided on this type of funeral for Sasuke. As two Anbu appeared with Sasuke body in their arms and they quickly threw it into the air as they made hand signs and sent out two great fireballs cremating the body. The Hokage then said, he will be marked down as a traitor to Konoha and will forever be remembered as a disgrace, never being honored. Now that his body has been taken care of, I would like to continue with the funeral service for the honorable Hyuga clan. I would like for everyone to bow their heads as the gongs are rung 12 times in memory of them. As everyone bowed their heads, a loud gong was heard. Naruto closed his eyes as he lowered his head and listened to the gong, thinking about Hinata. It was then that he felt it. He quickly opened his eyes and saw feathers and screamed, Genjutsu, as he put his hands in a ramseel and quickly sent out a massive chakra pulse, dispelling it on everyone within 100 yards of him. Kurenai said, nice, I had just noticed it a moment before you did. Just then several explosions were heard around Konoha and the third, who was on a platform, said, all Chunin and Junins are to go intercept the attacking army. Genin are to aid in moving all civilians to the shelters. Namikaze, it seems Shukaku is here, take care of him. After that is Sanin, you are to aid where you feel you would be of most use. Making everyone in the crowd gasp at the name, and then again as Naruto quickly threw his cloak off him and extended his wings and looked at Kurenai before he took flight, shocking everyone. Kurenai said, Kiba, you aid Shino in helping evacuate the civilian. Shino, your rank in now active, you are in charge of evacuation Chunin. As she took off running toward the gates. Kiba looked at Shino and said, Chunin, what the hell is going on? Shino smirked and said, that is not for you to know right now. My bugs detect several people heading this way who seem to be our enemies. As his bugs flew out of his jacket. The Hokage quickly got rid of his robes and saw Manda with Orochimaru on its head. He then saw the cage also there and he took off running toward it. Jiraiya, who had been behind the Sandaime when Naruto warned about the Genjutsu, quickly shushined to the west gates when he saw several summoned snakes appear. Naruto, after he flew out of the outdoor funeral, he quickly headed toward where he saw Shukaku. He flew toward it and saw several sound and sand nins coming in the walls. He quickly put his hands together and said, Taju Kajbunshin no just you. And 1200 Kajbunshins appeared flying in the air, stopping the force of the attacking and defending ninja as they all looked at the sky full of angels, and the Bunshin took out kunais and threw them at the ground, flashing through Han seals and said, Kunai Bunshin no Jutsu. As the 1200 kunais quickly turned into 12,000, blanketing the area where the ninja were, killing around 100 sound nins and 20 sand nins. At that moment they dispersed over the city, heading toward the enemies, taking out easy targets before heading toward Shukaku in waves of attacks and groups. At that moment the Konoha nin smirked as they saw the fear in the sand and sound nin's faces and began fighting with renewed vigor. Naruto charged at Shukaku flying and he saw Shukaku crush several trees as it approached the village walls. He then summoned a kunai and wrapped an exploding tag on it, throwing it at the demon as he flashed through his own hand seals, and the kunai multiplied into 30, and suddenly from behind him 100s more came flying by, all hitting Shukaku at different spots, completely covering him in explosions. Naruto smirked and thought, "You're not so tough." Just then a scream was heard from inside the smoke from all the explosions, and then the smoke was sucked away as mouths could be seen all over the demon's body sucking in huge amounts of air, and Naruto's smirk fell away and he had to throw a Hiraishin kunai at the ground as the demon launched massive blast of air at all the flying bunchins. Instantly nearly 900 of them were destroyed. The forces of sand and sound smirked at this and began fighting Aegean heavily. Naruto frowned as most of his clones were destroyed and he noticed all the damage was slowly repairing. He saw he was near Shukaku feet and smirked as he quickly bit his thumb and started flashing through hand seals as he flew toward the demon's feet and slammed them into the ground, instantly launching Shukaku into the air as Gambunta appeared underneath him screaming, "What the hell was that on my head?" as he turned and saw Shukaku hit the ground. Gambunta's sweat dropped as Naruto landed on his nose and said, "Sorry about that, boss. He was getting too close to Konoha and I need your help defeating him." Gambunta saw Shukaku getting up and said, "I see, you owe me for this kid. There's the spot. Look on his head, you see that kid asleep on it. That is the source of his power. Wake the kid up and the demon will go back to sleep." Naruto nods and said, "Can you help distract him a few minutes?" Shukaku screamed, "I will kill you, angel, and your little frog too." Gambunta's sweat dropped and said, "I am neither a frog or little bub, let's dance," as he pulled out his dagger. Naruto smirked and flew into the air as Gambunta jumped at Shukaku and cut off his arm. Naruto flew under both, and when he was under Shukaku he threw another kunai with an exploding tag on it at Shukaku tail and multiplied it, and then flew up the back side of the sand demon as he was screaming about its arm. His tail was blown off, making it scream out and fly into Gambunta's arms, and both Gambunta and Shukaku kissed. As both jumped backwards gagging, they screamed at the same time, "I am going to kill you." As Gambunta attacked with his dagger and Shukaku grabbed his tail, reforming it into a club, and they began fighting each other. Naruto's sweat dropped when he saw the kiss and then the so-called weapon fight and looked around to see what he could do. He then smirked and created as many Kajbunshians as he could, and they flew into the trees and laid about ninja wire everywhere before they destroyed several trees with Rasengans, making them fall. Using the wires they began flapping their wings and slowly picked up the log and flew with it toward the sand demon's backside, and Naruto flew in the middle off the two fighting gaints and screamed, "Konoha Ultimate Secret Taijutsu, 1000 feet Tree of Death," as the tree was flown right where Shukaku should have been, making the demon scream again as it flew toward Manda. Several minutes earlier the Sandame landed in front of Manda and sent a massive mud dragon at Manda, which forced the snake to dodge and Orochimaru and the Yondaime Kazekage to jump off of his head. They landed on the ground and Orochimaru said, "Ah sensei, it's good to see you again. Tell me, have you come to offer me help destroying the leaf?" Saratobi said, "No, Orochimaru, I can't believe you would stoop so low as to attack your home village." Orochimaru said, "What a shame. Tell me, what's with the angel I have seen?" as he looked where Naruto was fighting Shukaku. Saratobi chuckled and said, "Ah yes, I believe you are not familiar with Naruto Namikaze, the Tenshi Sannin of Konoha." Orochimaru narrowed his eyes and said, "You lie. There is no Tenshi Sannin and there are no Namikazes. The last died out saving this pitiful village." Saratobi said, "Ah yes, remember how he beat Kyuubi? That was his son." Orochimaru went wide-eyed a moment. Just then an explosion happened behind him and he saw Manda being crushed by Shukaku, who was on of the snake. Just then Gambunta landed on top of Shukaku, crushing Manda even more, and said, "Anyone for a sandwich?" Orochimaru was not amused and quickly, while everyone was distracted, summoned the grasscutter and spat it at the Sandame, who was looking at the summons and demons. The sword pierced him in the stomach, making him go wide-eyed, and then looked at the sword before he slowly started to stagger, already feeling the effect of the poison. Naruto was flying after the demon when he saw Gambunta land on it and said, "Anyone for a sandwich?" as he jumped again. Naruto giggled at the joke until out of the corner of his eye he saw the Sandame stagger a little with a sword in his stomach. Naruto screamed. NNNNNNOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOOO back looking at the smirking Orochimaru and the smug Kazekage and released the hold he had on Gambunta, making it return to the summon world. Naruto arrived at the hospital and quickly ran inside and saw several medics, and he grabbed one and said, "Get me some doctors now." Releasing enough Ki that made the doctor piss himself. The medic nods and ran off, and a few seconds later several came and gasped seeing the Hokage. One removed the sword and started working on him and frowned and said, "He's been severely poisoned. I need him taken to ICU immediately," as he took off with the Hokage and several medics. Naruto looked at the sword and grabbed it before turning and storming toward the exit. He saw Iruka, who had his arm in a sling, and said, "Iruka, are you okay?" Iruka looked at Naruto and said, "Yeah, my arms got broken. I am running low of chakra, but other than that I am fine." "What are you doing here? I figured you would still be fighting." Naruto looked outside and could see Shukaku coming toward the village Aegean and said, "The Sandame's been critically wounded. Can you still run?" Iruka said, "Yeah." Shocked to hear the Hokage was out of action. Naruto said, "Good, I got a mission for you." Iruka said, "Naruto, He was silent when he saw the glare Naruto shot him and only could nod. Naruto said, "I need you to find Ibiki and tell him I need him to prepare all ninja for a counterattack. I am about to blow a hole in the enemy lines." Iruka nods and jumps away, scared for the first time in a long time of Naruto. Naruto quickly flapped his wings and looked at the sword and said, "Let's go find your master," as he flew into the sky. Naruto quickly flew toward Shukaku again, and when he got close enough he threw grass cutter as Shukaku yellow eye piercing it, making the demon scream as Naruto flew at the head of the demon who was thrashing about, grabbing the sleeping Gaara, yanking him free of the demon's body as he flew as fast as he could toward the sky. When it got to the point he thought he couldn't breathe, he began to spin as he pulled his wings around both him and Gaara and then fell at terminal velocity at the ground, and when he was about 1,000 feet from the ground he opened his wings, letting go of Gaara, who slammed into the ground. Even when the sand caught him several bones were broken, and Naruto using his speed grabbed the sword that was laying in the middle of sand, flying toward where Manda was again with the Kazekage and Orochimaru on top. Both men were smirking as a sonic boom was heard, and they looked toward their left and saw something flying across the ground at speeds they could not follow. All they saw was the dust trail behind it as it approached, and Orochimaru said, "Manda, look out." Manda looked and at that moment screamed out as Naruto pulled up under its belly, slamming the sword into its skin, pulling it as he flew up the snake's body. Orochimaru and the Kazekage both jumped away as Naruto flew past them in the air, making both look up as he threw the sword into the heart of the Kazekage as he spinned quickly, getting rid of his speed, and said, "Orochimaru, today you die." Orochimaru said, "Well, if it isn't the Kyuubi brat. Tell me, was Sensei final moments painful?" as he smirked. Naruto charged at the body of the Kazekage, grabbing the grass cutter and flashing through hand signs as the sword was covered in wind, and Naruto charged Orochimaru and sliced the body of Orochimaru, who fell over dead, shocking Naruto as the body that fell over was not Orochimaru but Mizuki. Naruto looked around and saw Orochimaru was nowhere to be seen. Letting his anger get the best of him, he flew toward the walls of the city and saw a new wave of enemy forces coming. This time they all had Chunin and Junin vest on, and he thought, so he used Genin and Mercs as cannon fodder to tire our troops out. Well, he with the wrong village. As he closed his eyes, Ibiki, Kakashi, Guy, and Jiraiya all landed beside him, and Jiraiya said, "What do you think, Gaki?" Naruto said, "Tell everyone to fall back behind the walls and hold on." Kakashi, "If I don't survive this, take care of Kurenai and Sakura for me." Making all four men look at him. Jiraiya narrowed his eyes and said, "What are you planning, Gaki?" Naruto said, "A bloodbath." As he slammed Grasscutter into the ground in front of him before he flew in front of the walls, as all his Kajbunshin landed around the outside walls, and then suddenly chakra strings were connected to each of the Kajbunshins as Naruto slowly opened his eyes. Jiraiya said, "Ibiki, do what the Gaki said. I don't know what he plans, but I got a bad feeling about this." Naruto suddenly exploded with chakra that transferred to each of his clones, and Kakashi looked at Guy and said, "You didn't, did you?" Guy, who was wide-eyed as well, said, "No, I swear." Naruto body then exploded with chakra Aegean, which transferred to each of his clones. Then a third and fourth explosion his. Naruto opened his eyes and said, "Today you will all die. Tell the Shinigami to have Orochimaru room waiting for him." As he began flashing through hand seals as chakra began seeping out of each of his and his clones' wings, and they all said, "Dai Kamedachi," great cutting whirlwind, and flapped their wings toward the attacking army several times as wind blades flew into the air before Naruto's body exploded a fifth time as the chakra wave passed from him to each of his clones. At the moment of release, the wind condensed together and became self-reliant. Jiraiya said, "My God," as he used chakra to hold onto the roof as the attack began. Naruto clones all exploded as he fell to the ground, passed out, and his body was slowly being sucked toward what he had just created. Jiraiya, acting quickly, summoned a toad who caught Naruto in its tongue, pulling him back. Kakashi looked at the destruction as several of Konoha shinobi arrived, and one asked, "What is that?" Jiraiya said, "It's an attack that has not been recreated in nearly 200 years. It's called the Living Maelstrom. Nothing survives it. It is all wind. The color you see is because of all the dirt and trees that are being cut to ribbons in it. The last person to create it was the Sixth Realm Sage, and it cost him his life. Nothing any of us do can stop it. Once it starts, it moves on its own until it wears itself out." Kakashi asked, "How powerful is this attack, Jiraiya-sama?" Jiraiya was quite a moment and said, "You've been to Wave before, right, Kakashi?" Kakashi said, "Yeah, not too long ago. Why?" Jiraiya said, "The bridge they built. The Great Naruto Bridge. How wide is it?" Kakashi said, 2.5 miles. "Why?" Jiraiya looked at him and said, "Before 200 years ago, that stretch where the bridges was once land that connected Wave to the Fire Country. That attack destroyed the land and create that channel between Wave and Fire Country. To think the Gaki here just created the same attack." Everyone was looking at Naruto, who was still being held by the toad, and a Chunin asked, "Who is he, Jiraiya-sama? He looks familiar, but I can't place him." Jiraiya said, "This is Naruto Namikaze, son of the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha and the Tenshi Sanin." Just then a high-pitched scream was heard and a voice said, "I will kill you, Angel," from inside the attack. As each of the men looked, they could see the demon Shukaku being pulled away in the attack. It was 2 miles wide and was moving very slowly away from the village. Anything that got close to it would be sucked into it and cut to pieces. The sand and sound armies were running from it as fast as possible in retreat. For those of you trying to image what it looks like, it's an F5 tornado. Silence was all that could be heard as everyone slowly went about looking for any remaining enemies, wounded allies, or dead bodies. The first wave of the attack had ended and several good men and women had lost their lives, but the results of this attack would forever change the world. The day was the birth of the Tenshi Sanin, the Angel of Death. The day where Konoha's simple lives were changed forever. To what was still to be determined.